One person agreeing with that robe-wearing politician sentiment, my good friend and talk show host, Dr. Michael Savage. Dr. Savage, we welcome you back to America's Forum.
Well, I'm not just talk show host. I'm at the top of the heap, but thank you very much. I have to say that I'm in the major leagues on the biggest stations in the country, and I have a huge audience, and I'm shocked that the Catholic League of all organizations would attack me when in the darkest days of the church molestation scandals, I was the only one on radio defending the church. I did so over and over again. And in my first bestseller, The Savage Nation, I defended Pius the 12th. In a great chapter, Was the Catholic Church Silent During the Holocaust? And my conclusion, with after reading much evidence, is absolutely not. They did all that anyone could possibly do. And yet I've been attacked repeatedly, despite that the fact that I've defended the Catholic Church. So let me start, JD, by saying I think it is, I'm not Catholic myself, but I think Catholicism is a beautiful religion, and I think it unifies people in a beautiful way towards God. Having said that, that does not mean I have to accept everything that a Pope says. Moreover, JD, this Pope, Francis, is going against the doctrine of the Church itself, which is legitimately anti-communist. The Catholic Church has traditionally rejected communism and socialism. Not only recently, but this ideology was rejected not only a quarter of a century ago under Pope John Paul II, by the way, but this new Pope Francis, who was originally from Argentina, although he never practiced liberation theology, he was certainly shaped by it. We must not forget this. Pope Francis is the first non-European Pope selected in 1400 years, JD. Who selected him and why? Why after 1400 years did they select a man from a socialist background? Number one. Number two, the church itself eradicated this ideology of socialism nearly 25 years ago. Why is it suddenly showing its ugly head again? The Pope goes before the United Nations, who called him there, by the way, JD, and listeners of Newsmax, he was invited to this group of top UN officials in Rome to talk about the molestation scandals that were not covered properly according to the UN. I'm not a fan of the UN, by the way. And instead of talking about that, which he refused to talk about, he talked about legitimate redistribution of wealth. He talked about helping to curb the economy of exclusion that is taking hold today.
Michael, let me just ask you one thing about this, because some of the Pope's defenders have said, well, wait a minute, his comments are taken out of context when it comes to the notion of redistribution of wealth. Is there anything to that kind of explanation from his defenders?
I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm reading the actual quotes. He called for governments to redistribute wealth to the poor, to help curb the, quote, economy of exclusion. I'm quoting him now. These are his words. He said a more equal form of economic progress can be had through, and I'm quoting, JD, the following, quote, the legitimate redistribution of economic benefits by the state.
So by definition, in your mind, Michael Savage, do you believe Pope Francis should be called a socialist pope?
I don't care what anyone calls him. I disagree with that philosophy. I pay 60% of my income through the state. I pay 39.7% federal tax. I pay 13% state tax in California. I pay local taxes. What do they want me to do? Give 150% of my income?
Well,
now, let me go back. This is very important because one of my listeners has been listening to me since 1994. She's a Catholic, a devout Catholic. And she said to me, Pope Francis needs to read Pope Leo's encyclical, written in 1891, on capital and labor. JD, can I have a minute of your time?
We've got about that, Michael, so go ahead.
Pope Leo, in 1891, wrote that the socialists, working on the poor man's envy of the rich, are striving to do away with private property and contend that individual possessions should become the common property of all, to be administered by the state or by municipal bodies. And then he goes on, and then he shows how the authority of divine law forbids us in its severest terms even to covet that which is in others.
Michael Savage, I appreciate this. You've been very indulgent with your time. We're running out of time in this segment, but we know people will be listening to you and we invite you back to talk about this and other matters, and we appreciate your time, sir.
Just that the Pope doesn't even know his own doctrine.
We appreciate it, Michael. Let me